The incident I'm about to share is something I personally witnessed from beginning to end, so I remember it vividly. At the time, I was only about 15 years old. It happened to my mother. One night, while our whole family was asleep, I was jolted awake by the piercing scream of my mother. I rushed to her room and found her trembling in fear. My father was by her side, trying to calm her down. Later, my mother explained to me what had happened that night. She had been trying to fall asleep like the rest of the family. It had been difficult for her to sleep lately, but that night she heard a distinct tapping sound from the darkness. Wondering what the noise was, she looked in its direction and realized it was her brother, my uncle, who had passed away not too long ago. He was standing there, tapping on the wall with his hand. Then he turned to her and said, "Akai," her name. "They buried me alive." My mother said that when my uncle raised his hand, showing his wounds, she screamed and woke up. She wasn't sure if what she saw was a dream or reality. But one day, while she was cooking in the kitchen, she heard the same tapping sound from behind her. When she turned around, she saw my uncle again, tapping on the wooden door, just as she had seen him that night. She was so terrified that goosebumps covered her entire body. Suddenly, my uncle turned to her and shouted, "Akai, release me." And seeing this in the middle of the day shook her deeply. The truth is, my uncle had been dead for 3 months already. He had been an alcoholic, and after drinking, he often became violent. He used to hit his wife and mistreat his family. The day he died, he had come home drunk and, in a fit of rage, argued with his wife. As he was coming down the stairs, he lost his balance, fell, and hit the back of his head, which led to his death, or so his wife told us. I didn't attend the funeral, but my mother did. Since it was in the village, the funeral was a simple affair. About 3 months later, this incident happened to my mother. Everyone thought my mother was just hallucinating due to emotional distress, and they advised her to see a doctor. But my mother insisted that her brother hadn't died naturally and was not at peace. When my mother tried to contact my uncle's wife from the village, she couldn't reach her. So, my mother decided to take me along to the village. When we arrived, we found my aunt bedridden and seemingly very unwell. My mother asked her what had happened, and she explained that ever since my uncle had died, she hadn't been able to sleep properly. Every night, she was haunted by my uncle, who wouldn't leave her alone. When my mother heard this, she told her that my uncle had been haunting her too, which is why we had come to the village. My mother suggested they should dig up my uncle's grave to check. Although my aunt was reluctant at first, saying she didn't want to reopen old wounds, my mother was insistent. Eventually, arrangements were made with the authorities to exhume the body. The entire village gathered because no one had ever seen a grave being dug up like this before. My aunt was too ill to come, so it was just my mother and me. When they opened the grave and unwrapped the body, we found my uncle's corpse, and what shocked everyone was that his fingers were scraped, as if he had been clawing at the inside of the coffin. The whole coffin lid was scratched with fingernail marks. It was clear that my uncle had been buried alive. The authorities took the body for further investigation, and my mother made merit for her brother by offering alms to monks. However, my aunt's condition didn't improve. In fact, she grew worse and began speaking incoherently. She claimed that my uncle was always beside her. Eventually, the police arrested her for my uncle's death, and that's when we learned the truth. On the night my uncle died, he had come home drunk as usual, argued with my aunt, and as he turned to leave, my aunt, in a moment of uncontrollable anger, hit him on the head with a wooden stick. He fell down the stairs and was knocked unconscious. Thinking he was dead, she hurriedly buried him, which led to the events that followed. My aunt was deemed mentally unstable, so she was not held criminally responsible and was sent to a psychiatric hospital. Since then, my mother has never seen her brother again. My aunt, however, even to this day,